41 years ago, I packed one bag and walked off a farm in rural Georgia with $60 and a bus ticket to anywhere. That is how I started. I want you to know that before you know anything else about me, because the woman who said what she said to me at that dinner table had decided she already knew my story, and she had decided wrong. The farm was 200 acres of somebody else's land, and a house with no insulation, and a water heater that worked some months and didn't others. My father got up at 5 every morning without complaint, which I used to mistake for contentment, and now understand was just the practiced dignity of a man who had decided bitterness cost more than he could afford to pay. My mother had that same quality, that same refusal to fold, and I inherited it from both of them without knowing I was inheriting anything. My sister Glenda and I shared a bed until I left. We talked in the dark until one of us fell asleep. She was the one who first said, when I was maybe 15 and already restless, "T, you're not going to stay here your whole life. I can feel it." She didn't say it sad. She said it proud, like it was already decided. She was right about that, and she's been right about most things since. Her name was Candace. She was sitting directly across from me, in a restaurant I had paid for, at a table I had booked, and she leaned forward with her wine glass in her hand, and her voice low and sweet, and she said, "Carol, you really shouldn't pile your plate. You didn't exactly contribute to tonight, did you?" She smiled when she said it. That's the part I keep coming back to, the smile. I set my fork down, not fast, slow, the way you put something down when you've already made a decision and you just need your hands free. Then I stood up, said, "Excuse me," walked to the front of the restaurant, and had a conversation with the manager that took less than 4 minutes. 47 minutes later, Candace's card was declined in front of 8 people, a waiter, and her own mother. The bill was $630. She had no idea I'd authorized every cent of it, and she had no idea that the moment I walked out of that dining room, I called the restaurant and told them to release the hold on my card and run hers instead. There's a word for what she was counting on. It's the same word for what she'd been counting on for 3 years, that I would absorb it, that I'd go quiet, the way older women are supposed to go quiet, the way women who came from nothing are supposed to be grateful they're included at all. She had built her entire picture of me on that assumption, and it was the most expensive assumption she ever made. Before I tell you the rest, do something for me right now. If anyone has ever made you feel small at a table you built and paid for, subscribe to this channel, because every story here is for the people who got underestimated and then stopped cooperating with it. Hit that button, then come back, because this story is only getting started. My name is Carol Sims. I'm 62 years old, and I grew up sharecropping cotton in a county that still doesn't have a traffic light. My mother cleaned houses. My father worked the land of a man who owned it. Neither of them ever owned anything themselves, not a square of dirt, not a car that was fully paid off. The word equity was not a word that came through our front door. I left at 17. Not running from them, never that. They were good people who worked themselves hollow so I could have a little more than they did. I was running towards something I couldn't name yet. I cleaned offices at night and took classes in the morning. Business administration at a community college, then accounting, then a CPA certification I studied for on my lunch breaks with flashcards and library books, and a stubbornness that my professors called admirable and my classmates called intimidating. By 25, I had a job at a real firm. By 32, I had my own clients. By 40, I had my own practice, 8 accountants under me, and a building downtown I'd bought with a loan I'd paid off in 6 years. Numbers were how I survived. Numbers never lied to me, never underestimated me, never smiled at me across a dinner table and told me I hadn't contributed. Numbers told the truth, and they told it cleanly, and I trusted them more than I trusted most people. Let me give you some of those numbers, because they matter to this story, and because people like Candace never think about them. By 32, I had 12 steady clients. Small businesses mostly, a dry cleaner, a printing company, a woman who ran a catering operation out of her garage and needed someone to help her look real on paper. I worked their books at night, after Marcus was in bed. By 38, I had 40 clients, an office on the second floor of a building downtown, and one part-time employee. By 45, I had my own building, bought outright, 8 accountants, and a list of clients that included 2 regional banks and a hospital system. The morning I signed those building papers, I called my mother in Georgia from the parking lot and read her the address off the deed. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Baby, nobody in this family has ever owned a building." I said, "We do now." And she cried, and I cried, and then I went inside and got to work. That building, that practice, that 22 years of before dawn mornings and missed weekends and nights at the desk while Marcus slept. That was what Candace had decided was nothing, or at least nothing worth asking about. My son Marcus grew up watching me work. He was a good boy, quiet and sweet, the kind of child who carries your grocery bags without being asked, and cries at sad movies and means it. I gave him everything I never had, not just money, though he had that too. I gave him the belief that effort was the whole game, that you could start from anywhere and build something real. He grew up and became a landscape architect, good at it, genuinely talented. He married Candace at 34. She was pretty and sharp, and had the particular confidence of a woman who'd always had what she needed, and had never once had to ask where it came from. I wanted to love her. I tried hard to love her. She made it difficult from the start. The first Christmas, she told Marcus, in front of me, that my decorating style was a lot. The second year, she started referring to Marcus's college fund, the one I'd saved for 18 years, as the money his mom gave him, like it was a birthday check and not a decade and a half of careful planning. She had a way of talking about me that was always slightly off, like she was describing a character in a story, rather than a person in the room. There was the time, at Easter the first year, when she introduced me to her cousin. As Marcus's mom, she does taxes. Not an accountant, not a business owner. She does taxes, like I sat at a folding table at H&R Block in February. There was the time I came to Sunday dinner with a bottle of wine I'd specifically chosen because Marcus had mentioned it was good, and Candace looked at the label and said, "Oh, that's sweet." Not the wine. Me. She meant me. There was the afternoon I mentioned, once, that I was thinking about taking on a 4th bank client. She was looking at her phone. She said, "Busy," and went back to scrolling. I let all of it go, every single time. I told myself that she was young, that she was adjusting, that marriage takes time. What I was actually doing was teaching her that I had no bottom, that there was no version of dismissal that would cost her anything. You teach people how to treat you. That is the most uncomfortable truth I know. And for 3 years I had been running a very patient and very expensive class. What she never did, not once in 3 years, was ask me a single question about my work, about my practice, about how I built it, about what it had taken. People who have always been comfortable rarely ask those questions. They don't need the answer, because the answer doesn't apply to them. They already know how the world works, and the world they know is the one where money appears when you need it, and the people who make it appear are just quietly there, in the background, like appliances that hum while you go about your life. I was the appliance. That's what Candace had decided. And appliances don't need large portions at dinner. Now let me tell you about the dinner itself, because the setup matters. My son turned 40 that October. 40 years old, my boy. The same child who used to fall asleep on my shoulder on the bus coming home from his piano lessons. I wanted to mark the occasion. Something real. I'd been planning it for 2 months, the way I plan everything, carefully and completely, so that when the night arrived it would feel effortless to everyone else. I chose a restaurant called Hawthorne, the kind of place with a sommelier and a tasting menu, and cloth napkins folded into perfect little peaks. I'd been there once for a client dinner and remembered the way the light fell through the windows at 7 in the evening, the way the whole room went gold. Marcus would love it. I knew what my son loved. I made the reservation 6 weeks out, 8 seats, Marcus and Candace. Candace's parents, Leonard and Sylvia, who I'd met twice and found to be pleasant people, Leonard with his fishing stories, Sylvia with her careful attention, Marcus's old college roommate Devon, and his wife Renee, who I liked without reservation, the kind of people who laugh easily and mean it, and my sister Glenda, who'd driven up from Savannah because missing Marcus's birthday was not something Glenda would ever do. I called the restaurant on a Tuesday afternoon, spoke to Thomas, who managed the private event side of things, told him it was a 40th birthday dinner, 8 guests, asked him whether the round table by the east window was available, the one I'd noticed at the client dinner, and he confirmed it was. I put my card on file. I asked him to bring out a small dessert for Marcus at the end of the meal, with a candle, nothing theatrical, just something that marked the occasion. Then I asked him one more thing. When the bill came, I wanted it brought directly to the guest at seat 5, the woman across from me in the green dress, without any discussion first. He didn't ask why. Good managers never do. I put the reservation in my calendar and went back to work. Now, why didn't I tell anyone? People always wonder that. If you paid for it, why not say so? The honest answer is this. I have given things to people my whole life, and I have watched what happens when a gift comes with a label. The label changes it. The receiver starts thinking about what it means that you gave it, whether you're keeping score, whether they owe you something now. The gratitude gets complicated with obligation, and the warmth of the thing bleeds out of it. I wanted Marcus to have a beautiful night. Not a night where he spent dinner wondering whether his mother was making a point. Not a night where Candace got stiff and quiet because she knew who was paying and felt watched. And if I'm fully honest, I had also learned by then that anything I arranged openly, Candace found a way to diminish. She'd once changed a restaurant I suggested to one she preferred without asking me, just sent a new address 20 minutes before we were supposed to arrive. Another time I'd brought dessert to a family dinner and she'd set it aside to serve something she'd made instead, in a way that was perfectly friendly and left no room to object. So I kept the dinner quiet. I told no one. I let it simply be a beautiful reservation that Marcus had received a card about, a place and a time and an occasion, with no mention of who'd arranged it. This left one important opening, one critical assumption Candace was free to make. And she made it, exactly as I'd suspected she would. I put my card on file. I told the manager it was a birthday dinner, asked him to bring out a dessert for Marcus at the end, and confirmed that the bill would come to me quietly, without being laid on the table for anyone to fuss over. That last part was intentional. I didn't want anyone to feel obligated. I didn't want a production. I wanted Marcus to have a beautiful night, and Candace to have no idea who had arranged it. Not out of secrecy, I simply knew her well enough by then to know that a woman who'd been dismissing me for 3 years would find a way to diminish whatever I gave. I was right about that, though not in the way I'd expected. We arrived at 7. Marcus looked around the restaurant the way he always looks at beautiful spaces, slowly, taking it all in, like he's storing it somewhere. He squeezed my hand. "Mom, this place is incredible." "I know what you like," I said. We were seated. Wine was ordered. The bread arrived, the kind with the herb butter that makes you close your eyes. Glenda was already in her element, telling Leonard a story that had everyone laughing within 5 minutes, because Glenda has always had that gift, the kind of woman who can make a waiting room feel like a party. The first course came, a small plate of oysters, local ones, iced and perfect. Marcus leaned over and said something quietly to Devon, and Devon laughed, and I watched the two of them, these middle-aged men who used to call me from college asking how to do laundry, and felt the fullness of it all. Sylvia, Candace's mother, asked me about my work, and I'll give her this. She was the only one at that table who ever had. She asked what kind of accounting I did, and I told her, and she listened with the genuine attention of a woman who has been underestimated herself and therefore makes a point of seeing other people. I liked Sylvia, I always had. Your own firm, she said, nodding. That's remarkable. How many people do you have? 8, I said, plus me. Since when? The practice, 22 years. I've had the building for 12. She looked at me for a moment in a way I recognized, the recalibration, the moment when someone's picture of you adjusts to fit what you've actually said. Well, she said warmly, good for you, Carol. Truly. Candace, beside her mother, was looking at her menu. I watched Marcus across the table and felt the specific warm fullness of a mother who has lived long enough to see her child happy. That is a particular feeling, if you know it. There's nothing else quite like it. Then the appetizers came, and I reached for the serving spoon, and Candace said it. Not loud, not ugly loud, conversational loud, the kind that carries just far enough. Carol, you really shouldn't pile your plate. You didn't exactly contribute to tonight, did you? The table went quiet, the way water goes still, right before it drains. Glenda's hand stopped moving. Devon's wife looked at her bread. Leonard looked at the ceiling. Sylvia, her mother, made a small sound with her throat that wasn't quite a word. Marcus said, Candace, very quietly, one word, but one word from a gentle man who never makes scenes, is a sentence. She heard it. She put her wine glass down and said, Oh, relax. I'm just saying, we should all be mindful since Marcus is paying, and laughed a little, the way people laugh when they want to rewind something they've already said. I looked at my son. He looked at me, and I gave him the smallest nod, the kind only a mother and a child who have been each other's whole world can read, and it said, Let me handle this. Excuse me, I said, to no one in particular. I picked up my purse. I walked to the front of the restaurant. The corridor from the dining room to the host stand was maybe 40 feet. Dark wood paneling, soft light, the muffled sound of the kitchen behind a swinging door. I walked it slowly, not dramatically, not performing calm, genuinely calm, the way you're calm when you've already made the decision, and the decision is right. I thought about the $60 on the bus. I thought about my mother cleaning other people's houses and never once complaining about it, not because it was fine, but because she'd decided that bitterness cost more than it was worth, and she didn't have the budget for it. I thought about the flashcards I'd made for my CPA exam, spread across a lunch table in a break room, and the woman at the next table who asked what I was studying, and when I told her, said, a little surprised, Accounting? That's a lot to take on. I thought about taking it on anyway. I had been underestimated my whole life by people who decided they knew my limits before they knew me. And I had built every single thing I had in direct, quiet response to being underestimated. Candace wasn't new. She was just the latest version of a thing I'd been answering since I was 17. The manager's name was Thomas. He was a tall man in a dark suit who had the specific quality of a person who has handled delicate situations so many times it no longer showed on his face. The reservation, I said. The 8 top for Sims. I need to make a change. Of course, he said. The card I have on file, I need that released. Don't charge it tonight. I opened my wallet and set down a different card, the business card, the one linked to the practice account I'd had for 20 years. Run this one instead. Same total. And when the bill comes, bring it directly to seat 5, the woman in the green dress. Thomas didn't blink. We'll take care of it. Thank you, I said. Then I went back to the table, sat down, unfolded my napkin, and picked up my fork. I took a generous portion of the appetizer. I enjoyed the bread. I talked to Devon about his new garden project and listened to Glenda make Leonard laugh again, and watched my son turn 40 at a beautiful table in a golden room, and I smiled the whole time, the real kind. The evening ran 2.5 hours, The food was wonderful. Marcus blew out a candle on a small cake and looked embarrassed and pleased in equal measure, exactly like he'd looked at every birthday since he was 4. Leonard told a long story about a fishing trip that was better than it had any right to be. Candace was quieter than usual, not silent, but the easy authority she usually carried had gone slightly flat, like a tire losing air. She could feel something was different. She just didn't know what. Around 9:45, Thomas approached the table. He moved the way good restaurant managers move, without announcing himself, without theater, just arriving at the right moment with the right thing. He set the leather folder down, smoothly, professionally, directly in front of seat 5, in front of Candace. She glanced up, glanced at the folder. The easy evening expression on her face shifted, just slightly, like a card turning over. "Oh," she said lightly, the kind of "oh" that means she was expecting this to land somewhere else. She looked around the table. "Marcus has the card, just give it to—" "The reservation holder requested the bill go to this seat," Thomas said, pleasantly, in the tone of a man delivering information rather than a verdict. Marcus looked at me across the table. I was looking at the candle on the dessert plate. Candace opened the folder. I heard the small intake of breath. $632 for 8 people, wine through 3 courses, the works. Her eyes moved across the total, and then she looked up at me, and something in her face was working very hard to find the version of this evening where she was still in the right position. "Carol," she said, "did you arrange this?" "I made the reservation," I said, 6 weeks ago. "But you never said you were—" "I don't recall saying anything about who was paying," I said. "You drew your own conclusions about that." The table had gone quiet, the way it had gone quiet earlier in the evening, but differently now. Then it had been awkward. Now it was something else. The particular stillness of 8 people watching a truth arrive. "I don't have this on my card," she said. Her voice had lost the conversational loud. It was small now. "I'd have to check what I have available." "You're welcome to try," I said. Leonard cleared his throat. He looked at his wife. Sylvia looked at the window. Devon's wife found something very interesting in her water glass. The card reader came. The waiter held it out with professional patience. Candace entered her PIN, carefully, the way you enter a PIN when you're hoping hard for a specific outcome. The machine beeped once, a short sound, the kind that means no. Thomas took the reader back with the tact that only comes with long practice. No comment, no expression, just a smooth pivot. "It happens," he said to no one in particular. Then he looked at me, and I took the business card from my wallet, the one I'd set aside for exactly this moment, and I handed it to him. It went through in 4 seconds. Marcus looked at his plate. Leonard poured himself the last of the wine. Candace sat very still, her hands in her lap, and for the first time in 3 years, she had nothing to say. The evening ended shortly after. Glenda rode with me, which was a mercy, because Glenda knows when to talk and when to just turn the radio up low and let a person breathe. We got 3 blocks from the restaurant before she said anything. "You paid for that whole thing in advance, didn't you?" 6 weeks ago, I said. Glenda looked out the passenger window. Then she made a sound, low and appreciative, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "Carol Sims," she said, $60 and a bus ticket. That's what she always says when I do something that surprises her. $60 and a bus ticket. It's our shorthand for the whole story, for everything it took to get from that farm in Georgia to any place worth being. "She really had no idea," Glenda said. "None," I said. "She decided what she knew about me a long time ago and never looked again." We drove the rest of the way mostly in silence, the kind that's full rather than empty. At her hotel, Glenda got out and then leaned back through the window. "For the record," she said, "I ate as much as I wanted, and it was the best food I've had in years. And you should know your face, when Marcus blew out that candle, was the most beautiful thing in the room. I drove home with that sitting warm in my chest like a hand around a full cup. Devon hugged me in the parking lot before I pulled away and said simply, "Good night, Carol," with the particular weight of a man who had seen everything and would say nothing. Marcus texted me when he got home. "Thank you for tonight, the whole thing, all of it. I love you." I wrote back, "40 years of you is the best thing that ever happened to me. Sleep well." I did not hear from Candace that night. Marcus came by himself the following evening. He didn't call ahead, just knocked, the same knock he's had since he was 12, 3 fast and 1 slow. I opened the door, and he stood there holding a paper bag with 2 slices of pound cake from the bakery down the street. My favorite, the one with the lemon glaze. We sat at the kitchen table. He didn't try to explain Candace or make excuses for her. He just said, "I should have said more than your name." "You said enough," I told him. "In that room, with those people, from you, that was enough." "It wasn't," he said. "Not for what she said." He looked at his plate. "Mom, did I know you paid for the whole dinner?" "No." "Did I know you paid for the house?" "The down payment," I said. "Yes, you knew." He was quiet for a moment. "I think I've been forgetting things," he said slowly. "Not on purpose. It's all been there, all my life, and I think I stopped seeing the person doing it." That landed somewhere deep and a little painful, the way true things sometimes do, because it wasn't just Candace I'd made myself invisible to. My own son, the one I would walk through fire for without blinking, had started to see me the same way, not dismissively, not cruelly, just as the background, the given, the steady warm thing that was always there. "You're seeing it now," I said. "Yeah," he said, "I am." We ate the pound cake and talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing, the way we used to when he was in college and called me on Sunday nights just to hear my voice. He left around 9 and texted me from the driveway, "Love you, going to do better." I wrote back, "I know you are. Go home to your wife." I want to tell you what happened next, because it's the part that people get wrong when they imagine how a story like this ends. They expect a grand confrontation, a final scene where everyone understands everything and says the right things, and something resolves like a door clicking shut. That's not how it went. Candace called me 4 days later. No fanfare. Tuesday morning, I was at my desk going over a client's quarterly returns, and the phone rang. She said she was sorry for what she'd said at the table. She said she hadn't known I'd arranged the dinner and she'd assumed incorrectly. She said she had been embarrassed in front of people she cared about, and that she understood that I had been embarrassed by what she'd said first. It was a careful apology, measured, the kind a smart woman gives when she's thought about it and decided what she can actually afford to mean. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Thank you for calling. I accept that." And then I said the part I'd been sitting with for 4 days. "Candace, I want to tell you something, not to embarrass you, but because you've been in my life for 3 years, and I think you deserve to actually know who I am." She was quiet. The good kind of quiet, the listening kind. "I grew up with nothing," I said. "I mean that in every way a person can mean it. No money, no safety net, no family connections, no one who'd done it before me to show me the way. I left at 17 with $60. I cleaned offices at night, studied in the morning, made CPA exam flashcards at a lunch table, while people around me asked if I was sure I wanted to take that on. I built a business from nothing that now employs 8 people and has been running for 22 years. The building my practice is in is paid off. The account that covered your dinner on Saturday is the same account that paid for every year of Marcus's education, his first car, and the down payment on the house you live in." A long silence on the line. "You didn't know any of that," I said, "because you never asked." You made a decision about who I was before we ever had a real conversation, and you spent 3 years confirming it because it was comfortable. I understand how that happens, but I want you to know that from now on, you're free to ask me questions, real ones, because you might be surprised by the answers. She said, very quietly, I didn't know about the house. I know you didn't, I said. That's why I'm telling you. It wasn't the end of everything. Relationships that have been growing crooked for 3 years don't straighten in one phone call. But something shifted that Tuesday. I felt it, and I think she did too. The week after the call, she texted me a picture. No message, just a photo. It was a framed certificate on a wall, blurry, taken fast like you take a picture of something you just noticed for the first time. I had to zoom in to read it. It was my CPA certification, the original, framed, hanging in the hallway of my office building. She'd apparently driven by and walked in and asked to see it. My receptionist, who has worked with me for 11 years, texted me right after, Your daughter-in-law came by. She looked at your wall for a long time. I sat with that for a minute. Then I texted Candace back. That was my 2nd year, before the building. She wrote, You must have been so young. 25, I said. Were you scared? I thought about it. The honest answer. Every single day, I told her. I just didn't let it make decisions for me. 3 dots appeared. Then, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't know. That was closer to the real apology than the phone call had been. People need a few passes at the truth before they can say it straight. I understood that. She started asking questions, small ones at first. How does a CPA practice work? How did you find your first clients? I heard real curiosity in them, tentative but genuine, the kind that has to fight its way past years of having already decided. And I answered honestly. Every time. 3 months after the dinner, Marcus and Candace came for Sunday lunch, the first time she'd come to my house without making plans to leave by a specific time. After we ate, she sat at my kitchen table and asked me to tell her about the day I left Georgia. So I told her. The $60, the bus, the town I ended up in because the bus went there, and I had to start somewhere. The night classes, the flashcards, the years of being the only woman in the room who looked like me and had come from where I came from. The first client who told me I was the best accountant she'd ever had. The morning I signed the papers on the building. Candace listened, not politely, really listened, the way you listen when something is landing new. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. I thought, she said slowly, that Marcus's father must have, I assumed there was, I don't know, someone who helped. There was someone who helped, I said. It was me. She looked down at her coffee cup, and then she said something I hadn't expected. I'm sorry I spent 3 years not asking. That was the real apology, not the careful Tuesday phone call. This one. 4 words, plainly said, in my kitchen on a Sunday afternoon. I reached across and covered her hand with mine. You're asking now, I said. If you stayed with me all the way here, you know something already, that the hardest part of that whole dinner wasn't the moment she said it. The hardest part was the 3 years before it, the 1,000 small quiet moments when I smoothed things over and kept the peace and let an incorrect story about me take root and grow, because I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable with the truth. There is a version of generosity that becomes its own trap. When you give too freely, too quietly, too consistently, the people receiving it stop seeing the hand that holds it out. The gift just becomes the weather. It becomes something that happens to them, like warmth in summer, like something they deserve, simply by being present in your life. And the person giving it, the woman who got up at 5 in the morning for 22 years, the woman who built the thing from nothing, she becomes furniture, background, there, always there, never the point. I let that happen. I want to be honest about my part in it. I chose the invisible approach because I thought it was kindness, and in some ways it was. But kindness without visibility is not a complete gift. At some point, the truth of who you are and what you've done is something the people who love you deserve to know. Not so they owe you something, just so they know who they're standing next to. So before you go, subscribe to this channel, because every video here is about what happens when you finally stop protecting the people who are comfortable being wrong about you. The button's right there, and you've earned the right to watch the rest. Here is the thing I'd leave you with, the one real thing, no sermon. When someone assumes you didn't contribute, they are not insulting your past. They are telling you how little they have bothered to see you, and you have two choices in that moment. You can correct the assumption out loud, right there, and spend your energy on the argument, defending yourself to someone who's already decided not to hear it. Or you can let the truth arrive on its own schedule, the way it arrived at that table, quietly, at 9:45, in a leather folder, handed to the wrong person, with the right name inside. I chose the second one, not because I'm patient by nature. I'm not especially. I'm someone who learned, on a farm where the water heater worked some months and didn't others, that the things worth having take longer than you want them to, and you do the work anyway. Truth doesn't need your voice raised. It doesn't need you to explain or defend or prove yourself to anyone who stopped paying attention long before they sat down. It just needs you to have paid the bill in advance. My name is Carol Sims. I started with $60 and a bus ticket, and I built everything else myself. And I always eat exactly as much as I want.